right. My name is Corey Petty. I do a myriad of things throughout the ecosystem, namely podcasting, Hashing It Out, which is one of the sponsors. And I've been doing security and I guess security education or awareness for status for the past 4 years or so. I've recently moved more into infrastructure, but I still have quite a few opinions. And I've worked with basically everyone in terms of bug bounties and bounty programs and security programs and audits and so on and so forth. So I'm really curious to see how this works out and how we do it with Anand. So in the interest of keeping it fun and light, I don't have any objectives. I just want to have a conversation. So I'm going to do what I normally do and allow people to introduce themselves because they can always do it better than I can. So let's start on the couch here. Tell us who you are and why you're here.
Is this working? Yeah. Okay, swell. My name is Mitchell Amador. I'm the founder and CEO of Immunify, and I am here to encourage as many people as possible to participate in responsible disclosure and frankly get more involved in security in the Ethereum space. I think we need a lot more.
I'm Frederick Santos. I work for the Ethereum Foundation as a security researcher, mainly focusing on the consensus layer and the merge. But yeah, I'm also running the bug bounty program for the EF.
I'm Emiliano Bonassi. I'm happy to be here with these great folks. We spent many nights together, saving a bunch of protocols. Now I'm the founder of Rentable, a protocol for renting NFTs, but I worked a lot in security, in war rooms and so on, and I'm here to promote and support people to advocate security practices in their protocols.
Anand, Sam, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Sure thing. Hey, I'm Sam. I guess I'm here because I do a lot of bug bounties and white hatting in my spare time. So let's see. I used to work at Trilobits. I used to do some audits there. Now I work at Paradigm as a research partner, mostly focusing on security in the space as well as within our portfolio companies. And then in my spare time, of course, helping report all these fun bugs.
Storm? Okay, can we get that fixed? All right, well, and while he's trying to get that fixed, we can keep going. It's nice that we have both sides of the coin here. We have the people who are actively looking for security vulnerabilities in the ecosystem for the purpose of fixing them and not exploiting them, which is a wonderful thing to have. So, and making reasonably good money doing so while lifting up security across the ecosystem. And we have the people who are providing opportunities for them to do that while maybe not necessarily forcing them to work within a given firm to get that done. And it's something that I've seen grown within this ecosystem more than any other, both in trying to do programs myself and looking around for opportunities or teaching people on how they can get started. So let's start with the people who are providing the platforms to do this. Where do bug bounties fit in? And we had a conversation a little earlier about this with your talk, but where do bug bounties fit into the overall security process of the ecosystem?
Sure. So, I can take this one unless you want to do it, Frederick.
Oh, you can start.
Okay. Bug bounties are the very last tool in the security stack. Ideally, you've invested resources into everything else, and it's the last thing you have. It's the thing you can pour a lot of resources in, but it's the very last thing that you should be leveraging. And so, because of that, it's when everything else fails, you absolutely need this to work.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. It's definitely not something that you should just get and then skip everything else. It's something that should augment everything else that you already have in your toolbox.
Sam, what about you? Where do you think it fits in? Should it be do you agree with what they've said?
Yeah, definitely. I think, first of all, I think, the cost of a bug bounty compared to an audit is multiples higher, right? So obviously you don't want to be relying on bug bounty to sort of find what you're paying the auditors for. Definitely agree that, you should be treating the bug bounty as if all else fails, then at least we have this in place to sort of, mitigate the few final attacks remaining.
I would like to, I definitely agree that bug bounties fit in as something like we've done as much as we can. Let's have what was probably the easiest way to have continuous security coverage of an underlying protocol by saying, like, this is the scope of work we think is risky. Have at it, people. We'll pay you and we'll do things. And what is the hard part about this for protocols, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong here, is for projects to understand the scope of which they want people to focus things on and the amount of money they should be allocating resources to, and whether or not they even have those things based on the rising prices of what payouts are. How do you help projects figure out what they should be having people look at and how much that's worth?
Okay, so the first thing to consider is where bug bounties came from. Previously, especially in Web 2, it was very hard to assess the value of a vulnerability, and so we came up with CVSS and other convoluted ways of calculating what a bounty should be paid as, but it was all very arbitrary. Arbitrarily designed, kind of connected to the level of interestingness and how bad multiple factors could have been, but it wasn't. There was an attempt to make it systematic and connected to value, but it could not have been successful because you cannot compare the exploitability and unique characteristics of an exploit directly to the value of that particular exploit. It's totally different in crypto. We now have a way of describing exactly what the consequence of this exploit is, and we should be moving in that direction. The scope that matters is not really, or not necessarily, the scope of assets at risk and the level of creativity and the degree of penetration that an exploit could create. The scope that matters is the impact. What tangible result does this have to the protocol? Does this have to the user? What damage does it cause? And based on that, based on the prevention of said damage, how should the person who directly prevented that damage be compensated? This, I think, is the way to proceed.
Frederick, does that transfer over to more infrastructure related things? Because this works really wonderfully. It's more, I guess, easier for smart contract situations.
Yeah,
as we move more to like infrastructure and node management and the things that you're working with the merge, it may be a little more muddy.
Yeah, it is. It's I think a much more complicated question in that sense, because it's covering almost everything. If you're looking at like different DeFi projects and so on, they're kind of in these kind of small islands that they're trying to protect. But when you're trying to protect the base layer, everything is kind of in scope. So, if the base layer goes down or there's a massive exploit or something, all the other projects that's running on top of it will probably be affected in some way. How do you measure that? What's that worth, bounty-wise? So it's a very hard thing that we're looking at.
Wouldn't the answer be a lot?
It is a lot, and that's a very long discussion, I guess. But yeah, so currently, I don't know, for those who don't know, the bounty for the execution layer, so that's Get, basically, that's running right now on the bounty program, that has been $25,000 for a critical vulnerability, which is kind of low, considering the impact that it could have. For the consensus layer, which means that the clients that are running the node software for the validators, that's been $50,000 as a max payout, which is also pretty low considering the TVL on Ethereum. That's going to be adjusted upwards, so it's going to be made into 250,000, which still is, it's not that high compared to Maker or Wormhole or anything else. So yeah, it's a hard question, but for now it's been the Ethereum Foundation that's been paying for all of these bounties as a public good service, kind of, because yeah, so the Ethereum Foundation has been interested in keeping the Ethereum mainnet secure. And because of that, they have been paying rewards for the 9 different clients that kind of exist now, both on the execution layer and the consensus layer. One of those clients are actually being developed by the EF. The rest are being developed by external teams that the EF does not have any control over. So it's a public good service, but I do think that the the ecosystem should come together and create some kind of fund that would, I don't know, help increase the bug bounty for the base layer 10-fold, 20-fold, who knows, but to an amount that makes it worth for researchers to actually spend time looking at it and getting an ROI for it.
Our virtual participants, how much does the bounty amount affect the amount of time you're looking into a specific thing? You clearly understand the concept of risk, but you're spending time looking at various things probably based on the potential rewards. How can you reason about understanding risk in something that doesn't have high bounties, and then spending time on something else?
Do you want to go first, Sam?
Okay, I can take this one first, I guess. Oh, go for it.
Okay, I can go first. I guess, it's a complicated problem. Like, how do you get to the 99% of the bugs of a contract? At some point, I'm guessing you get diminishing returns of the time you spend, and couple that with what's the potential impact that you can have, or the bounty that you can pay. Like, I'm very much from our side, like, and I'm on both sides of this problem, because like I receive bounties from Immunify because I'm on top of watching the security part on Yearn. At the same time, I look for stuff when I have the time. And it's really hard to measure how much time you can dedicate, and it's an asymmetrical problem that we have, because there's too many eyes looking at our code from the bad side, and we need more people from the good side trying to and incentivize them.
Sam?
Yeah, I think for me at least, frankly speaking, the bounty amount does factor into my consideration quite a bit. I think if I'm, depending on my current mindset, like if I'm, if I set aside some time to look at bounty specifically, I'll like scroll past most of the lower capped bounties. If I just get like a ping with some message, that might short circuit the process. But in general, definitely expecting that. Typically, when a project makes out Immunify or similar, they've probably gone through a pretty rigorous process, and so therefore, if it's under some threshold, it's likely not worth the time I spend to get up to speed with the code base to actually start doing that.
Yeah, I would add honestly that at least for me, when I look for bounties in general, I look more for the interest. So maybe I could got interest about some exchange, some lending platform. Maybe I'm more skilled on those kind of issue, so I try to filter those kind of things. But for the, let's say, bounties that I received, basically most of I wasn't looking for a bounty. I was building some sort of integration or something like that, or I was studying the protocol for my own, and I discovered the issue. So it was not driven by the size of the bounty or whatever, but more by the interest. Anyway, for many other people, the interest is more, the bigger is the bounty, the better for me, But it's not always, that if you go to the biggest bounty, you get it, or, it's easier.
Yeah, and for the EF bug bounty program, that's definitely the case. It's the people that have reported have mainly been people that have either they're into cryptography, or they're into just specifications of the base layer, or they're developers or something like that. It's not so much about the bounty itself, because it takes a long time to wrap your head around the base layer. Probably a few months for a person who's not really dug into it before, and then you're going to have to look into clients. So it's a big effort. So that's a hurdle.
I just want to echo that. So you have this class of bug hunter that is really driven by the bounty size, or at least that's a precondition. That's most people, it's normal, it's healthy, but you have a whole other set of bug hunters that are kind of just incidental, that have exactly the attitude Emiliano described, or that Frederick described. Like, we have a whole bunch of CTOs and senior engineers who use Immunify, but they're not looking specifically at bounties. On the contrary, they're analyzing related projects, trying to understand how their contracts are written, trying to understand the features that they have. And in the process of that, they discover vulnerabilities. In the first place, it's like, okay, I should go to Immunify and report that, see if there's a bounty. But that's incidental. They're really just going after what they think are the most interesting technical problems. And, if there's a reward for helping that project, then that's a great bonus. They know exactly where to go to claim that.
I think that speaks to all the projects out there that, regardless of the scenario or your ability to assess risk or scope, you should have some form of way of telling people where to go in the case they find something, and that you're willing to negotiate with them, that you're willing to work with them, as opposed to letting them try and think about what to do with the vulnerability they may have found. And that transitions nicely into something that I kind of wanted to dive into a little bit, and that is we have two people virtually here who have some form of pseudonymous or anonymous personality. How does that fit into your reasoning and participation in this community? Why anon, and what does that do for you?
I'll let Sam answer first.
Yeah, I think the moment you mentioned anon, the first thing that came to mind is all these programs that or at least claim to enforce KYC on their bounties. And I'm just like, why? So that part's a shame. But I guess the question of why is best answered just by the fact that, I think a lot of us are pretty security conscious. I think you sort of have to be when you're doing security, and especially security in this space. And so, it's obviously the less of, this is true in smart contract engineering, where like the smaller your attack surfaces, the less potential vulnerabilities you have. And I think it's the same case for personal OPSEC too. It's like the less information you expose, the less potential risk you have, in whatever that may be.
Totally agree. That it's the same case for me. Like, it's incidental that I happen to be looking at security stuff. I decided to, whether that's anonymous, our mindset is always think about the worst case scenario. Like, even when you're looking for smart contracts, so how do you go about your personal stuff within Yearn? We have both people that decided to be open and people that want to respect their privacy, and sort of like the culture that we promoted within the DAO, but to the wider ecosystem, you should be accepting bounties from anyone, because this is you just need a POC and code. That's it. You don't need to know who this person is to be actually work with the bounty and patch things. So.
And I think that we've created an ecosystem and a technology that further enables people like you to contribute vulnerabilities without disclosing who they are, based on our ability to pay you. And can you talk a little bit about some of the benefits not maybe not benefits, but difficulties you've found in the process of doing this? Maybe whether that's in different war rooms of trying to do coordinated disclosure with people when you find things, or things you may need to look out for that you didn't think about ahead of time when trying to continuously protect your identity as you have more and more maybe reputation around disclosing certain types of vulnerabilities.
Well, I think that you hit a good point. That the important stuff is that you build a reputation up to you. So despite you are anonymous or non-anonymous like me, the important stuff is that people know you, okay, despite who are you physically. So honestly, my experience, the founders or the people that we supported never cared too much about who we are at some point, okay? Yeah, there are some protocols that maybe could be scared at the very beginning, but as soon as you in the war room, explain and you have a positive attitude, so we are here to help, not to, blame or whatever, that's, they start to hear you, so they don't, you have also to think that they could be scared at the beginning. So me and Mitchell have, several instances where, the founder could be a little bit threatened because, okay, it's my first issue, security issue, what I do, who you are, maybe they don't know you. So having, trusted party that maybe are not Anon could help. But also, people like Sam Storm, they have a pretty good reputation. So somehow, that they are good.
Two things there. Can you give projects an idea of how to foster that environment so that people are more willing to try and join a war room and disclose things if they're nervous about doing that and maybe feeling from traditional attempts in this and maybe Web 2 or being attacked or like, why are you trying to do this to me? Like, I'd say we foster a little bit better of acceptance of these things because everything's so transparent. How can projects make people feel more comfortable about disclosing things and doing coordinated disclosure on fixing them?
Well, the first rule for me is that you have to be prepared. So you have to know that at some point you have to coordinate some people. So you have to, you have to provide a security reference. You have to incentivize people to contact you. Instead, if you don't say on your web page that there is a security reference that, we can contact in case of security issue, that's just, it's also just, a red flag for a protocol, So as soon as you have a security contact, maybe you have a partner like Immunify, that's a good way to incentivize people to talk with you. I'm not sure about, I saw many, not many, but some of the protocols that maybe are listed on Immunify that require KYC for the IS bug bounty. Honestly, I don't know why you should know that guy. I can understand on the other side that maybe, the guy is disclosing one bug per time. So maybe start to drip your bounties because maybe instead of disclosing all of them, disclose one by time. And so knowing exactly the person could help to, avoid those situations. But honestly, the more you are open about your, let's say, public security procedures or the way that they can contact you, that's the better.
You have a slippery slope here because we see the two we have today are known for their work quite publicly, and because they are pseudonymous or anonymous, they've built up a reputation on merit, and that's why people trust them when they say something. But if there's a completely unknown person that's never disclosed something to you, there's this potential that they're the developer that's disclosing the bug in the first place, and you need to go through additional kind of, that's why I could imagine someone would want to do KYC is to guarantee something like that.
But it's not a guarantee though. You could get a friend to submit it, for example. That's another option, of course.
Well, let me jump in on this, right? The KYC issue, as noted, is easy to dodge, and usually any requirements for KYC have nothing to do with security and everything to do with the tax man. Especially with large bounties, someone's got to pay the bill, and when that money leaves, the government's like, "Oh, that's interesting. $1 million, $1 million off your books. What did you do there? You just pocket that?" And so that's typically the origin of those needs. Whereas, and that should be kept very separate of like, how do we make it easy? How do we make it safe, fundamentally, for someone to do a good faith action and disclose a vulnerability? That's an expectation setting problem. That's a signaling problem. By having a clear bounty program, by having clear references, by showing, hey, look, we do care about security. Here's all the things that we do. Here's what we commit to do with you. If you help us in this work, you can actually eliminate most of those trust problems. Just think, when we get called into a war room, the biggest problem with most disclosures is actually the projects freezing up or them being highly distrustful. They create the problems by not being prepared and not setting great expectations around how the process needs to go so that we can easily work with them. If those two things are in place, and there's no reason they can't be public ahead of time in their docs or elsewhere, then the process can be very smooth. And this applies whether you're a non, whether you're a public. It should just be a very clear, very simple. We should have a lot of trust in the process of disclosure. That is what I think would create all the difference. But of course, that requires work. That requires an investment into security, and who wants to do that when they can make more money?
Yeah, and for our program, I would say that we have security researchers, and that probably helps quite a bit because we can then start to assess the report, see if it's actually valid, check if other projects are perhaps impacted by the same vulnerability before we start the conversation with the reporter. And yeah, I mean, we've received, I think, 150 valid bug reports through the program. So we can kind of spot the ones that aren't actually real issues and the ones that you need to dig into and speak with the reporter more about.
Storm, Sam, you've all had any experiences in the past of finding something and then realizing the project and maybe how ready they are and just being like, no, thank you.
I helped. We were at Yearn looking. We do due diligence on some of the stuff where we decide to allocate funds. So a strategist will propose a strategy and say, yeah, this is new protocol in Phantom happening a lot. They're mostly forks of forks, which is worrying. And we usually never put a cent before we do due diligence, and that entails a small review of the important aspects, like what's the multi-sig situation, how can they upgrade the contracts, where are they anon? Well, who is in the multi-sig? Is there somebody trusted? It doesn't need to be like a known person, but at least they have the reputation that we're talking about, and how the contracts work. What is the diff of what they changed from the original fork? Things like that. And we bump into one of those projects, and they had 0 docs, 0 way to contact them. And we found quickly an issue, what Emiliano was saying, like, these are things that once you get enough money, I wrote this in Twitter recently, you should start caring about how people are going to get to you real quick. If the only way that I can contact you is through a Discord, in your project phase, there's probably there's going to be issues. Like we've seen like developers before trying to go to Discord and getting like shut down by the support staff, which is really not they're not ready to take on this. Like you should have a proper channel. And they get scared. Like it's something that you don't train. There's no way to get experience. Just I recommend drills. We started drills very early on in Yearn, but it's just the fact that all the stuff that we touch on DeFi, we get affected a lot. So by whether that's good or bad, we get a lot of experience on this. But yeah.
Anything to add? Anybody? All right, I had small shift here, and then I'll get to some questions. I literally have no idea how much time we have left, so 10 minutes, cool. This will be a pretty quick one. In my experience doing bug bounty programs and trying to basically incentivize the swarm of hackers out there to look at my code base and specifically target the ones that would be good for looking at my code base and giving me meaningful feedback, either from me raising security of the products that I'm offering or finding a marketing funnel of people being familiar with my code base. I've had very varied experience and quality of candidates based on the platforms that I use. And so the name of the game for an organization to do bug bounty programs is to find out where the hackers are that can do anything that is useful for you. So hackers are, more often than not, you're typically using multiple programs, assuming that multiple programs are paying you out commensurate to your time and effort. Where are you using? Where are you going? Where do people, what can we do as people trying to get a hold of you? Like start talking to the right programs or doing the right things to incentivize your effort to work on the things that we want you to work on.
I think he's looking at you, Sam. He wants to get you on status pretty fast.
Anybody that's capable of looking at quality code bases, it's hard.
Yeah, no, I think part of it is definitely, I mean, Immunified's been a great help here, just sort of aggregating these projects and having one centralized feed of, you know, what's available, what's in scope, where to report even. A lot of other times it's really just, you know, the age-old game of here's a contract on mainnet and I don't know whose it is and I don't know what project it belongs to, and now begins the guessing game. And actually, I think on that regard, there was this interesting initiative in the Solana ecosystem where I think Neodyme or one of the firms, they did like security.txt, but for blockchains. And so you could embed in your Solana program this like this, not necessarily a text file, but like, you know, a Solana buffer that contains information about your contract and where to contact. And I think currently the closest alternative we have to it on Ethereum is like you could add a comment to the top of your contract as you verify it that says this is the project. Even that would be a great help. If someone just finds your contract on mainnet with no documentation, it sometimes is a pretty big pain to sort of figure out who exactly it belongs to.
Anything to add, Storm?
Yeah, I mean, on the regards of bringing more people, like more eyes engineering, like I agree, like Immunify is doing a great way of funneling a lot of the talent that we have, but we still, I think it's something that we're all aware that we still need to do a lot more. I try to follow on Twitter security researchers from outside crypto, and you get wind real quick that the top bounties, Google, are 50K probably, top. And they actually, and and that's what they get when they get paid. Actually, like people that are able to they have the capacity and the skills to look into bounties of those closed systems. Like we know not everything is open source. Apple, like everybody has the skills to can perfectly apply them to smart contracts, and even smart contracts are all wide open. How do we get engagement with that community? Because for good or worse, like crypto has this rep, and probably if you heard it, you decided on it fairly quickly. And so it's that's sort of like a challenge that we need to address. How do we get more security people that come from that background into smart contracts, which I think are a great fit. And that's probably how we all got started. Somehow we come from different systems, and we just apply those skills to Ethereum and open contracts.
If I can add something, completely agree to what Sam and Storm said. If I could talk directly to those people, you know, that should come to the Web3 world, I think that it's not only the money, okay, that is pretty interesting, you know, because in traditional world we have, you know, just 50K. Here we are talking about millions and then billions. The stuff is that it's, you know, intellectual interesting, you know, this kind of technology. Okay, now we have Solidity, but now we have also Solana, you know, with other you know, constraints. So if you are hungry of, you know, understand, dive deep on things, you know, in addition to enjoy your time, you're getting a lot of money. So, but this means that, you know, maybe you start being interested in security, and then maybe you start to work with that protocol, you know. So I think that working in security, Mitchell know pretty well, is a very, let's say, interesting opportunity to approach this world, because pays a lot, challenges are very important, and also you have the opportunity to, you know, support someone, you know, being in a war room with experts where you can learn a lot. So I think that, you know, if you look to the complete picture, it's not just the money, okay? It's all all the things that you have around, working with great people, cultivate your interest, maybe, switch your career and maybe, start your own protocol or whatever you want. So I think that those are good cards to say, okay, if I want to start a career with Web3, maybe I won't fork a protocol. I won't develop our own. And I mean, just look in the other codes, learn how things works, and maybe spot nice, bounties that can be, I can buy a villa or whatever.
Yeah, I just want to echo, I guess, everyone who's been talking now that it's hard to find those resources, for sure. If you're looking at Web 2 people that are looking for SQL injections or cross-site scripting or whatever on web applications, you can find them in the hundreds of thousands, maybe millions even. But if you're looking for specialized people in blockchain technology and smart contracts and whatnot, it's very hard. So, I mean, it's great that projects like Immunify comes along and shows and kind of brings in all this kind of knowledge into a specialized platform where people can use it. But I also think that a lot of work has to be done on educating people. In Web 2, there was for a very long time, and probably still is, a very big shortage of security people. And in Web 3, of course, it's way, way more of a shortage. So there should be ways to kind of pull them in, train them, etc. And yeah, I mean, Securium and TrustX is doing a great job with that. So that's amazing that you're actually, pushing this knowledge forward. And yeah, hopefully, in a while, it will become better and better, and we'll get more researchers, more bug bounty hunters, etc. And we won't be wrecked anymore.
I want to summarize that and make the pitch to all the people who are here with us and watching it. So we're all telling you, come join us and a world of galaxy brains working on the world's toughest puzzles. And if you succeed, we'll make you rich and you'll be glorified for the very real contribution to society that you did. This is a pretty compelling pitch, at least I feel, and I hope as many people who are watching this take advantage of it and join us, because God knows we need you. There just aren't enough of us.
And you don't even need to tell us who you are.
I'm sold.
So we could take a little bit of time here to get a couple questions from the audience. There may be, we have some great people on the panel here. Any questions? Got someone in the back. Can we get a microphone to him? Back middle.
You can take my microphone too.
Got a bunch up here.
Yeah, man, we're loaded.
Okay. Thank you for this panel and for all the members contributing, sometimes from remotely. I have two questions, basically. The first one is, how do we make sure this works not only for DeFi project where there is a lot of money at stake and obviously you can pay huge bounties, but also for code that is community good, that a lot of people rely on, and that we critically need being secure. That's the first part. The second part is, you've mentioned like using bug bounties to check code that is already on mainnet in production and live, and that's basically that's your last resource before an hacker does something bad. What about using the same system way before deployment, particularly when auditing companies are fully booked and you have a community that might help you before deployment?
Okay, so the first question, which is basically, I didn't fully understand the beginning. Part of it is, how do we get the projects who aren't, DeFi protocols with billions of dollars in TVL to also benefit from the system? And what was the first part of the question, so we all understand?
No, it's just, that there are projects that don't have money at stake and they need this security critically. You mentioned the execution layer. That might be one of them.
Gotcha. Okay, well, the reality is, money is a very motivating factor. We all know that. We're not going to be able to convince lots of people, especially those who need it, to work for less. However, projects have another very compelling thing to them, which the Ethereum Foundation fully leverages to the maximum ability, which is both the social good, the pro-socialness of the project, what kind of contribution you can make to other people. That is really compelling. I do lots of things. It costs me lots of time, energy, and suffering, and I do it just because I feel like I'm making an impact and a contribution to others. That needs to be sold up front in the bug bounty program. It is valuable, and it should be used. And then the other factor is what Emiliano explained to all of us, which is the interestingness. To be frankly, the best people are just as much motivated by the hardest, most interesting problems just to see if they can do it as they are by the money. You can make money tomorrow, but the most interesting problem in the world, gotta deal. That's exciting. It's interesting. And this is what public goods projects especially need to heavily leverage, because especially for the ones that have tractions, those resources, that security talent is there, but their attention needs to be drawn with the thing they're interested in.
Just to reflect on that, even if you're listening and you're considering these things and we haven't quite convinced you yet, even if you work on a bug bounty program of an interesting project like the Ethereum Foundation and the Merge, and you don't quite find something, you're familiarizing yourself with a very complex code base in which we need tremendous amount of help with. We have, everyone in this room who has a project is hiring. So by participating in these things and us making it available for people to participate in them, we're incentivizing people to come look at this type of stuff and join us in a way that's comfortable, right? And I think that's important, and it gives you the ability to justify to yourself getting your first foot in the door and spending some time getting familiar.
Yeah, and if you are spending a lot of time looking at the EF bug bounty program, looking into clients, you're basically the kind of person we want to hire. So there's that.
Worst case scenario, you get a job. Any closing thoughts? I know this is the last panel, and Rajiv would like to say goodnight to, but guys, virtually, you'll have any more closing thoughts, or anybody you'd like to tell potential hackers or the audience or us, this is the people building things? Oh, we have one more question. Sorry.
Yeah. To immunify your point at the end, how do I get good enough? So I'm here. I want to be like that. What's the pipeline for that?
Okay, so oddly enough, look, there's quite a few guides, there's great CTFs, there's awesome work by Securium that you can go and build your foundations, and that's the most important thing in the beginning. But once you've built your foundations, if you want to go after the really novel problems and really get good, you have to do what all of these gentlemen here have done, which is go find the problems that are interesting to you and become an expert in it and push the limits. All the best security people that I know in this room are people who are they found something interesting to them. They said, I don't care if other people aren't interested. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And they built these amazing, sophisticated expertise that I was I didn't even know those problems were there. And that's how they became so good. So follow your interests after you got your foundations.
Yeah, I'll just echo that and say that, if you want to succeed, I guess this counts for anything. If you want to become really, really good, you have to have a passion for it. You can't just, take a course without having the interest and think that, you're gonna find a $2 million bug bounty. It's most likely not gonna happen unless you're really, really dedicated. You spend your days, evenings, nights, morning, thinking about this, doing it. Probably without getting paid in the beginning even. You're just doing it because it's a passion.
Sam, Storm, does that explanation resonate with the two of you?
Yeah, a large part of it at the start is really just building up. You almost have to build up the ability to sort of look at a contract and really look past what's testing. I think that's something you see in common with a lot of the more recent big findings, is that there are things that I think most people would not have considered. It was a way of holding the contract that you would not have thought of And so really, I think a lot of it is just building up that muscle, looking at all these contracts, figuring out how can you, rotate it, how can you twist it, shape, do whatever to like get at it in a different angle, and then with that new perspective, figure out what's wrong with the code.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the suggestion, like to start, go deep into, is one approach that's really good. The other thing that could be good would be to familiarize, once you have the foundation and some solidity, you understand, go read all the exploits that had happened. I believe that if you look at the code and you look at what was the expectation of those developers, like Sam says, that they missed that in retrospective is obvious. What was the mindset on that? You start getting patterns into now future code that you will look and sort of build your library in your head of what are the usual things that we screw up as a developers. And you'll see that some recurrent things, not everything, but some stuff continually comes back a lot. And it's just because the developers are human and we missed things. So that's a good, I think, way to approach it. The other things are programs like Securium. We now have Immunify. We're trying Yearn to foster Y Academy, which is also another program where you can come with some foundational skills and it's like a block, and we get you to some point where you're actually doing reviews and auditing protocols. So yeah, I hope more and more resources pop up that allow you to go through that funnel easily with some help.
I'll just make a short plug that I agree with Storm that looking at past exploits is definitely something that's extremely valuable. And I think it was about 4 weeks ago maybe, we actually did a public release of all the vulnerabilities that were reported to the EF. So that's 150 vulnerabilities that you can have a look at if you're interested in, seeing what kind of issues that people find, denial of service attacks, cryptography issues, a bunch of things. So feel free to have a look. You can find the link on blog.ethereum.org.
All right, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining me, virtual and physical, and thanks for listening.